Good evening and welcome to Hartland Township and the Planning Commission meeting of December 18th. We'd like to begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, item 3, our roll call. Commissioner Grissom, would you call roll, please?
Where do I read it? All right. What did I say? Up top. Larry Fox, chairperson.
Here.
Jeff Newsom, absent. Larry Hopkins, absent. Myself, here. Michael Mitchell.
Here.
Tom Murphy.
Here.
And Keith Boyd.
Here.
And Planning Director, David Campbell.
All right, thank you. Next up, approval of our meeting agenda.
I make a motion to approve our meeting agenda for December 18th, 2014.
I second. We have a motion from Commissioner Grissom, second from Commissioner Murphy. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have no meeting minutes to approve this evening. Call to the public. Anybody wish to say anything this evening?
Mr. Chair, it's standard policy that everybody in the audience has to step up and introduce themselves and make public comment. I don't know who wants to go first. We usually start on this side of the room, in the front.
We're just giving you a hard time.
They're already signed up.
Yeah, we already signed their sheets. So no comments tonight. We have no public hearing. They picked a very good evening to come. Item 8A would be our 215 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And what I would like to do is turn this over to our Planning Director, David Campbell.
Thank you very much. So this is, as the Planning Commission is well aware, an ongoing process that the Township and the Planning Commission started with in earnest earlier this fall. And what the Planning Commission is working toward is updating the future land use plan component of the Township's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the multi-year vision for Hartland Township. And the future land use plan and the corresponding future land use map, which is up on the screen on the walls here, is how the townships is designated based on a dozen or so future land use designations. Some of those designations are residential designations, some are commercial, some industrial, and some office. What the Planning Commission is working toward is updating the future land use plan in an effort to ensure that Hartland Township's future land use map can accommodate the types of residential development that we know the current residential market to be looking for. The Township earlier this summer contracted with a private consultant to do a residential market analysis, and the outcome of that analysis was to tell Hartland Township that over the next 5 to 6 years, the Township could absorb as many as 500 to 600 new residential units, and that's a combination of apartments, townhouses, single-family starter homes, all the way up to the large estate expensive homes. And the analysis gave Hartland Township a pretty good breakdown of how many of those different types of units the Township could absorb over the next 5 to 6 years. So now the role of the Planning Commission is to look at the future land use plan and future land use map and determine whether the plan and the map are appropriate to accommodate that type of development that we now know the Township could absorb. So the Planning Commission over the last few meetings has been taking about 3 at a time of these future land use designations and reviewing whether there is sufficient land in Hartland Township currently designated with those designations to accommodate the type of development we know to expect. This evening, the Planning Commission is looking at the multifamily future land use designation and also the village residential land use designations as they apply to the Hartland Village area and the Parshallville settlement area. So the first analysis that the Planning Department did pertained to the multiple family residential designation. And on the current future land use map, which the township adopted in 2011, multiple family residential is this orange color. And as you can see, most of the land currently designated multiple family is along the M59 or the US 23 corridor. And that makes sense in part because your multiple family is usually a higher density of residential development, and therefore typically needs access to municipal water and municipal sewer. And the township's municipal water and municipal sewer is mostly follows along the M59 corridor and the US 23 corridor. The analysis conducted by staff determined that the Planning Commission should give some serious consideration to looking for areas that could accommodate more of the multiple family land use designation, keeping in mind that the special planning area, which is this crosshatched area at M59 and Pleasant Valley / Fenton Road, could accommodate some of that multiple family. And in our talks with the new buyers of the properties on the north and south side of M59 in that special planning area, they do have interest in doing some of that multifamily. So the Planning Commission should keep in mind that it's very much in the realm of the possible that some portion of the 120 acres on either side of the road here is likely to develop in multifamily fashion. It's also worth noting that the residential recreation land use designation, which is comprised of essentially all of the Walden Woods Resort property and the Majestic Golf Course properties, also could accommodate multifamily type use. It's not out of the realm of possible that someday there would be some sort of a multifamily golf course community kind of meandering through there. So the housing analysis that the township had done recognized that there is an underage of multifamily residential in Hartland Township right now. Really, the most substantial multifamily development that we have in the township is the Oak Brook Apartments, which is on the south side of M59 across from the old high school. And there is 270 units in there. But that's the most significant multifamily traditional apartment development the township has. And what our analysis finds is that we could use more of that type of residential use in the township. So the analysis of staff, the recommendation of staff is that the Planning Commission should give consideration to additional multiple family designations on the future land use map. And sometime in the very near future, we would want to give some consideration of, if the Planning Commission agrees with that analysis, where those might be located. I think that's where I would pause and see if the Planning Commission has any thoughts, comments, discussion of that topic.
No, I think we all went through the housing analysis, and we all pretty much agreed with it. That at some future date, we were going to evaluate properties for that designation.
Just one quick question. Did the report from Zimmerman and Volk identify how much more we needed percentage-wise? I know it's 3% right now with the township.
Well, it didn't get as specific as to say, here's how much more land area you would need, but we could kind of back into the math a little bit. The analysis did conclude how many, new apartments you would need, how many townhomes, how many traditional condos, duplexes, triplexes, things like that. And our multiple family designation envisions 8 units per acre at its highest density. Now, that's fairly dense. Oak Brook Apartments is closer to 7 units per acre. So the question then would be, okay, to accommodate those 200 and something multifamily units that we know our market to be demanding, is there... I'm sorry.
Was it 234?
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. 234 units that the market demands over the next 5 to 6 years. Is the developable land in Hartland Township, currently master planned for multiple family, sufficient to take on that kind of a number given the densities that are envisioned? The analysis of staff is that there is an opportunity to look for more multiple family designations, again, unless we come to the conclusion that the special planning area and the residential recreation land use designation provides that sufficient amount of land. A reminder, I know very early in this process we were looking at the area up here along the Clyde Road, around the Clyde Road interchange, and the thought was, we already have some multiple family designation undeveloped land in that vicinity, but is it a possibility to look at more in this area with the theory of if and when this area develops as some sort of a office park, research and development park, something like that, a medical campus perhaps, would there be an opportunity to provide the multifamily housing in close proximity to that employment base, so that in theory the people that work there could live in very close proximity. That was a conversation that we had very early on in this process.
Any other questions on that for him? We're not selecting any areas tonight. Do you agree that we can evaluate it?
Absolutely.
And there may need more.
And while you're correct, we're not selecting any areas tonight, we do want to start getting into that realm of starting to hone in on where those areas might be over the next few meetings. And I recognize we're without two of our key Planning Commission members tonight, and I certainly think we want them to be part of these decisions. But the day is coming, and relatively soon, that the Planning Commission is going to want to start making some choices of where some of these land use designations that we know we need, where could they be located. I can move on to the village residential designation. So, as you can see at the bottom of the table, village residential is one designation, but the way we break it out in the 2011 update to the future land use plan is to look at the village residential in the context of the Hartland Village area, what people think of as downtown Hartland, right there. And then also in the Parcelville settlement area, up in and around the Parcelville cider mill, near the northwest end of the township. The conclusion of staff is that those areas are sufficiently served by the village residential designation, that we would not necessarily need to designate more land under that designation. The one thing that we do want to talk about the Planning Commission a little bit that we've already talked about in a different context perhaps is along the west side of Avon, we talked about the zoning discrepancy for, I think, 6 properties on the west side of Avon between Krause and the street to the north is escaping me.
Henry? Maple?
Not Maple.
Or further up.
Krause, and then 2 blocks up of Krause on the west side of the road. Those properties were once zoned village commercial, and due to a zoning map error sometime, we think in the mid-90s, that's since carried over into new zoning maps, those properties look like they've been inadvertently rezoned to village residential, which was a surprise to some of the residents. So this Planning Commission talked about possibly rezoning those properties back to settlement commercial. But I think that maybe since we're going through this process, it would be good to agree that that village commercial designation would be appropriate for those 2 blocks on the west side of Avon, so that when we do that rezoning sometime in the near future, we're doing so consistent with our master plan. I'm not sure how well I explained that, to be honest with you, but right now those properties on the west side of Avon are designated village residential, and it would probably make sense to redesignate them village commercial, so that when we go to zone them as such, we're doing so consistent with the master.
And this came up because a property owner was looking...
Yeah, the property owner, the Stagecoach House, I've heard it called, the White House that I think they take the kids on when they do the tour of downtown Hartland. I've been told there's a jail cell down there. I haven't actually taken that tour. But the owner of that property is looking to sell, and came to the township to verify the zoning, which she understood to be LC, limited commercial, and the township surprised her by saying, no, that's zoned settlement residential. and she asked us to look into it, and we did, and that's when we discovered that there was a zoning map discrepancy that we would like to correct. We've sent letters out to the property owners affected by it to see if they have any objections. The only responses we have been favorable. So we want to go through that process, but it would probably make sense to not necessarily put the cart before the horse, to agree that the commercial designation on the west side of Avon, north of Krause, is the proper land use designation, so that we can then do the rezoning consistent with the land use plan, which is always the way you want to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Correct? Agree? Yes, I agree. Okay.
So, with respect to the village area and the Parcelville area, the analysis of staff says that the land use designations in those areas, other than what we just talked about, those 2 blocks with frontage along Avon, the mix there is appropriate in terms of future land use designations.
Dave, are you only talking about the first 2 blocks?
Let me zoom in. Just bear with me for 1 second. So let me get up there, letting the computer catch up with me here. Phelps Street.
Phelps.
That one was driving me nuts. So we're talking about the Deering Museum. This is the Stagecoach House that I was speaking of on the corner. What would that then be? The southwest corner of Phelps and Avon. Actually, there's one property north of it. This is the insurance office, if you're following my mouse. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties on the west side of Avon, north of Krause, between Krause and Phelps. Those properties historically were zoned limited commercial, and as I mentioned, through a series of zoning map errors that predate all of us, were inadvertently rezoned to settlement residential. We would want to correct that error, but we would be doing so with recognition from the Planning Commission that it would be, in a sense, opening up some of these properties on the west side of Avon to more of a commercial use. Now, likely it's going to be something like what we already see down there, which is an insurance office inside of an old, what was once a residential home. Because the limited commercial zoning district does allow that mixture of uses, residential and commercial. A mixed-use downtown is what the limited commercial zoning district envisions.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So,
Question, 2 blocks only?
Yeah, I was just, sounds like it's more than 2, though?
2 plus 1 extra property on the north side of Phelps. I can't remember, Mr. Murphy, if this conversation about the rezoning predated you or not. But, yeah, it's an error that we'd like to correct. But we'd like to do so in conjunction with making a similar adjustment to the future land use map.
Okay.
So that was what I hope to discuss with the Planning Commission on those 3 future land use designations. Village residential in the village, village residential in the Parcelville settlement, and most particularly the multiple family designation. So the idea now would be to, within the next few meetings, start looking very closely at the map and seeing where some of these land use designations that we know we need more of, where might those be located.
Okay. Are you planning on is this coming off the map where we had the pink areas as possible changes?
That was our baseline. And so this map that we've seen, which is hand-drawn, I grant you, but this is the companion map to that pink map that you referenced, Mr. Fox, with the properties that we know to be at least in consideration for redesignation, kind of just outlined with a black Sharpie. We thought this would be helpful because then you could see what the existing designations are. So the properties that have a black Sharpie around them were the ones that very early in this process we said those are the ones that we should at least be looking at for a possible redesignation.
And not just the multiple family for the audience's benefit, it was for
Correct.
numerous residential classifications.
We
Density.
at our last meeting, there was some consensus that we could use more of some combination of the medium urban density residential and the medium suburban density residential. Some combination of those.
Are you familiar with the zoning in Purcellville? Do they have any village commercial in there?
They do. It's limited, I believe, mostly to the cider mill itself. I could just as
There
easily
used
pull
to
up
be
the
a party
zoning.
store down there, so I don't know if that,
How long ago was that?
20 years ago maybe? 25 years?
Let me just pull it up so we can all look at the same thing.
It's actually the place where the guy that builds he's got a little sawmill in there, wood craft shop.
Right next to it, right across from the cider
That was
mill?
in that building. It used to be a daycare for a while.
Okay. So there's more of it than I guess I thought. So the pink is the limited commercial zoning district in the Parsieville settlement area, and then the yellow around it is the settlement residential. So right up in here along the water is the cider mill, and there are some parcels in close proximity to it that also have that limited commercial zoning designation.
Right on the corner of Allen. Yeah, that's...
Yes.
Is he selling out of there, or was that for his hobby?
That was
I
for
remember,
hobby. Yeah.
I remember him coming in here.
And since we have this pulled up,
Bruce Garage.
Right, he's a big wood guy.
since I have this pulled up, and since we were just talking about it, so here's the village, and as you can see, these properties, west side of Avon, Kraus to Phelps, are yellow, which is the settlement residential.
There's one chunk that's, one lot that's already commercial.
Yep. And the idea is that this whole
Right.
stretch in through here, which is what the zoning map showed in 1990-something, and then there were some errors following that.
Okay.
Did you have anything else on 8A then, Dave?
8A, no, I was just looking for something of a consensus that the staff's recommendations are on the right track.
The only other thing I'd like to ask is, you mentioned that, I'm sure most of us have already been working on relocation or rezoning some areas, but can you just give us a summary at some point in time, either through a memo or something, that to make sure we're looking at the right different districts that we want to rezone? Not the districts, but the different rezoning, like this multiple family was one.
Are we
suburban
rezoning or rezoning or
future land use, I'm sorry, future land use. Just to remind us which ones we want to
Oh, sure.
look at.
Yeah, I think at the next meeting, we're going to have a memo that says, okay, staff's understanding is that we agree that we need more of the urban density single family and the suburban density single family and more of the multiple family.
That's where I was. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions for Dave on item 8A?
No.
Not, we'll move to item 8B, a revised timeline for our 2015 comprehensive plan amendments. I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Yeah, I'd like to think, this is a kind of an FYI. So this whole process that we're going through that you've heard me talk enough about is based on a schedule that the Planning Commission saw in October. And once the Planning Commission adopted the meeting calendar for 2015, that slightly adjusted the calendar or the schedule for this future land use map update, I think for the better. The most significant change is it would be at the first meeting in January that potentially the Planning Commission could say, we want to set a public input session for this process for the following meeting, which would be January 29th. The previous calendar, the way the dates fell for our Planning Commission meetings, we were looking to have that Planning Commission set that date tonight. So now we're pushing that to January 15th so that the public input session itself could be January 29th. It keeps it in line with the calendar for our meeting dates that the Planning Commission adopted 2 weeks ago tonight.
Do you recall, we moved those dates around when we adopted our 2015 calendar?
Yeah, if we had gone with our traditional second and fourth Thursday of the month schedule, we would have been having meetings on January 7th and January 22nd. Now we're looking at January 15th and January 29th. So, long story short, this updated schedule now meshes with that updated meeting schedule.
Okay, any other comments on that? If not, we'll close item 8B, call of the public. Anybody? Boy, it's a quiet group. Planners report. They picked the right meeting to come to, though.
Did you see the high school student in the black hat sneak in late? Planners report. So, new site plan was submitted yesterday for a KFC on the north side of M59, just west of, what do we call that, Hartland Point Plaza, which is where Little Caesars and Big B Coffee are located. There's some vacant land right next door there, and that's where KFC would like to open their new drive-through standalone restaurant. I'm sorry?
Did we already approve it once?
Yes.
Close. Close. So this is now the same applicant who came to the township years ago, looking to open a KFC very near to this same location. He's a franchise owner. He owns the franchise, I believe, in Howell and also in Fenton, and is also a Hartland resident. So looking to open his next franchise here in Hartland. So that's going to be a special land use because it's a drive-through in the general commercial zoning district, so that will require a public hearing. So we're targeting January 29th for that public hearing for the drive-through component of the special land use. Hartland Winterfest is getting bigger and better as we speak. It's still planned for January 31st at Heritage Park. That's the park on the north side of M59 where Haya has a lot of their football and lacrosse. There already is an ice skating rink built over there, and now we just need Mother Nature to cooperate and give us some ice. There's going to be fireworks. There's going to be food vendors. There's going to be lots of fun things for the kids. There's going to be a beer tent for the big kids. So hopefully it's going to be a big, successful event that will then be even more big and more successful in years to come. So hopefully everybody can make their way over there on January 31st. The Shell station on the south side of M59, just east of the expressway, is rebranding as a BP. So we've approved their new monument sign. The 50-foot pole sign is going to come down in favor of a new monument sign, 7-foot monument sign, a very nice monument sign. And they're also going to reskin the canopy around the gas pumps to be a BP canopy instead of a yellow Shell canopy. And if I mentioned this at the last meeting, at that time it was just a thought, but now they've actually submitted and we've approved, and so that's going to be happening here shortly. I think I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, Chestnut Developments on the south side of M59, the vacant land just west of Autumn Woods. They are targeting the January 5th Planning Commission meeting for a revised concept plan for 25 condominium units. And the last thing I have on my list is to remember to wish all of you a Merry Christmas. And a Happy New Year, because I won't see you until 2015.
All right, thank you. Committee reports. Anybody anything to add tonight? If not, I'd like a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn?
Support. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, and you guys are all free.